we're delighted that you're here. I'm really excited to end our 2023 season with these two wonderful women to talk about their experiences with audio description or their hopes and dreams for audio description. And we are recording this session and we will make this session available in a couple of weeks, probably. What April does is she cleans it up and we'll send it out to everyone who registered to attend. And then we also, it's up on our YouTube channel. It's Art Spark Texas on our channel. We have all of the conversations are archived there. So today, I'm Celia Hughes. I'm the executive director of Art Spark Texas. And we started in June hosting just a series of informal conversations with describers and people who are blind about audio description, and particularly about audio description for dance, because there's a lot of movement and a lot of activity happening in the dance world in terms of how to describe dance and how to make dance more engaging and accessible to people who are blind or have low vision. And so today we're going to hear from Kerry Thompson, who is a salsa dancer and also many other things that she'll talk to you about, and Kim Charlton, who is the director of the library at the Perkins School for the Blind. And Kim has been herding cats for the last 5 years as we work toward developing standards for certification in audio description. So Kim deserves a medal for trying to keep us all in line. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight the two of you and let us begin. So why don't you just start, Kerry? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
This is Kerry speaking. Celia, thank you so much. And I'm so honored to be on the same chat and talk with Kim Charlton. Kim Charlton is my hero. So as Celia said, I'm Kerry Thompson. I'm based here in Boston, and a little visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with long brown hair, wearing a black sweater. Behind me is a dining hutch with my china cabinet. So I apologize that you are seeing all my dishes. And I'm the executive director for Silent Rhythm, which I started as a nonprofit about 7 years ago. And the intent behind Silent Rhythm was to make sure that people with disabilities had access to the arts, as well as using the arts as a way to provide and promote inclusion for people with disability in society. In addition to Silent Rhythm, I'm also the Senior Advisor for Inclusion and Accessibility for the Disability Rights Fund, which is, both of them are based in Boston. DRF for short is about promoting human rights for people with disabilities all around the world. So that gave me a lot of insight into the disability movement, literally and figuratively. What I also do, as Celia just mentioned, she introduced me as the salsa dancer, so I suppose that's the element she found the coolest. Yes, I'm also a salsa dancer and dance teacher, and that is what I do on the side. I'm also a person with deaf blindness, so I know today our conversation is going to be a lot about audio description and dance, kind of centering the talk a little bit around people who are blind or low vision, but there's also another element that I hope to bring to this conversation, and that is about how people who are deaf-blind could also potentially take advantage of this service, audio description, and how could audio description be modified to be more accessible for people who are deaf-blind like myself. So I'll stop right here and give the mic back to Celia or to Kim.
All right, this is Kim Charlson, and thank you, Carrie. You're just one of my heroes too, so it's a mutual admiration society, let me say. I'm happy to be here with Celia, my colleague from the Audio Description Certification Project, and I've known Celia a long time, and she is so dedicated to audio description and access to the arts. So thank you, Celia, for having this event today, because I think it's pretty exciting to be able to talk about dance. So I have been very active as an advocate for audio description for a long time through my service as the co-chair of the American Council of the Blind Audio Description Committee. And I serve on that committee and kind of guide it, and it's 6 different subcommittees that work in various ways with media and audio description, performing arts, museums and visitor centers, parks, Section 508, benefits of audio description in education. We have an awards committee, and ACB also has coming up in 2024 will be the 4th annual Audio Description Awards Gala, where we honor the industry itself for their excellence, the studios, the companies involved in audio description that are really spotlighting and doing a great job in the field of audio description for entertainment, streaming services, and broadcast television. So my advocacy here in the Boston area surrounds local theater, live theater, and audio description, which is where my advocacy for AD started. We started with 1 theater and about 3 productions. We're now up to about 10 theaters and about 50 productions a season with audio description. And I do an annual season schedule for all of the theaters. I've herded those cats too, Celia, into getting all the theaters to coordinate their schedules a little bit, so they're not all having 5 or 6 different productions the same weekend and then wondering why no one came to their show. So I'm trying to get them to be a little more coordinated, spread the things out so there's more opportunity for blind people to actually come to the events that they work so hard to make accessible for us. And in my day work, I am the executive director of the Perkins Braille and Talking Book Library, which is the library affiliated with the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled of the Library of Congress. And I serve about 25,000 borrowers, primarily in Massachusetts, but Braille readers in New England, Washington, D.C., Tennessee, and North Carolina. So all of that keeps me really busy. So back to you, Celia.
Thanks, Kim. And I really am honored to be with the 2 of you here, and I look forward to our conversation. So first question is, when did you start to dance, or when were you first introduced to dance? And why don't, Kim, do you want to take this first?
Sure, thank you. So unlike what you're going to hear from Carrie, I am really not a dancer, but I appreciate dance and I like dance. And part of my motivation is wanting to make dance more accessible for others who are blind or have low vision to be able to understand it and access it. So my first exposure to audio described dance probably wasn't the most exciting experience, but it was amusing to tell it at a later date. I had the opportunity to go to the Easter extravaganza of the Rockettes in New York City live, and it was audio described, and it was fun. And when I got my headset and I tuned in, and the first segment of the Rockettes came out, and the describer said, and they kick, 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 left kick, right kick, more kick, 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 kick. That's about all I got for the whole hour or 90 minutes between pauses and songs and that kind of thing. And I thought, wow, is this what it's all about? So I wasn't particularly overwhelmed with that experience. Um, I have since in 2023 watched the Rockettes on television, broadcast TV, broadcast live this year. I think it was on NBC, but don't quote me on that. Um, and it was a whole different experience. It was live. It had a lot more character to the description of the Rockettes doing their dancing. It wasn't just they come out in a line and they kick, 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 kick. It was much more detailed about what they do because they don't just stand there in a line for the entire show and kick. That certainly is their trademark, but they do a lot of breaking into smaller groups, moving around, a lot of physicalness, a lot of athleticism to what they do and their movements. So that was my first experience. My second was going to my first production of the Nutcracker with audio description at the Boston Ballet. So that was a big production with like 2,000 people in the audience. And the describer, it was such a different experience from the Rockettes that, in fact, there was some pre-show planning around sort of introducing this first ballet with audio description in the Boston area to teach the audience of blind people a little bit more about some of the terminology around ballet, to introduce some of those words so that the describer could use some of them to explain the moves and some of the most popular ones that are used. And then that description happened, and it was beautiful. It was so artistically delivered with great emphasis and sort of that sense of feeling of movement in the voice. It wasn't a staccato voice just saying they moved left and right. It was flowing and elegant and just really meaningful to have that as part of the storyline as well of the Nutcracker. So my two experiences are very opposite each other, but it really did leave me with a passion to kind of make sure that describers get feedback from the audience about what it is that I think is meaningful for us, especially if we're not in the dance world, to have a better sense of the rhythm and the movement of what is happening and how much precision and time the production takes to make the dance moves just so intricate and systematic and just incredibly beautiful. So that is pretty much my beginnings and continuing work in the area of dance. And I'll hand it over to Kerry because her story is really interesting and I love to hear it.
This is Kerry speaking. Thank you so much, Kim. I love that story, and especially about the Boston Ballet and the Nutcracker, because I was involved in helping to get the Nutcracker to start thinking about expanding their access to all types of disabilities, not just AD, but tactile, sensory. And so it just made me feel pretty good when you said very positive things about that. So how did I, Kerry Thompson, get started into the world of dance? It all started when a friend of mine invited me to go salsa dancing with her. And that doesn't sound like a big wow, but to me it was, because as a person who was deaf, at the time I was more sighted. I have a condition that is called Usher syndrome, a form of deaf blindness where I was born deaf. And then as I get older, my eyesight deteriorates. So how did I get involved in the world of dancing? that a friend invited me to go dancing. And it was a wonderful thing because she didn't think about me being deaf. She didn't think about me being somebody who couldn't hear the music or understand what people are saying or whether I would understand the dance teacher as they were doing their salsa lesson. She just wanted her friend to enjoy something fun like dancing. And when we went to this salsa club, I fell in love with salsa dancing. It just spoke to me. It was so powerful. The rhythm, the vibration. Sure, I didn't understand what the dance teacher was saying, but I copied what I saw. I also don't know if you caught the part that I was explaining that I have a form of deaf blindness in which I was born deaf, but could see pretty well. But as I got older, my eyesight deteriorated. I'm now at that point where my vision is sort of between low vision, bordering on full blindness. So I'm entering a lot of new spaces right now. But with dance, going back to salsa lesson, I love dancing so much. I kept going back for more lessons, for more lessons. It was pretty difficult for me to understand everything that was being said, and it took me longer to learn. But eventually, I did learn and become pretty proficient at dancing and began performing around the country with a few friends and performing groups. And I was always the only deaf person, the only person with a disability on these performance groups. But I would share my story with my friends who were deaf, and they would all say, I really wish I could learn dancing. And I thought, well, if I learned it, you can learn it too. But you know what? I can make the lesson so much easier and more accessible for you. So that's why I started Silent Rhythm as a way to teach dancing for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. That was my original audience. And then over time, people with disabilities started reaching out to me and said, can I come join your dance lesson? I don't know where else I can go to learn dancing. And you seem like the best place to go where I might feel welcome and you would you would try to be accessible for me. So I thought, okay, great. Yes, you're very welcome to come. So I started including people with physical disability in my lesson, and then started, as my eyesight got worse, I started teaching dance workshop for people who are deaf blind. And that was more through tactile teaching, doing everything by touch. Over time, I'm starting to realize that I want to also teach more people who are low vision and people who are blind. So I realize that I need to be more descriptive in what I'm doing. So I am exploring a lot of different ways of accessing dance. I can't rely on visual for myself anymore. I'm relying a lot on touch, and I have not really started using audio description yet. I'm just starting to enter that space. And as I'm entering this new space and learning about it, I'm trying to figure out how can I get all my channels together. I'm trying to get information about dance as it's being performed through touch. And I'm also trying to get access to it through auditory means. I got my cochlear implant last year and now starting to explore the world of sound a bit more. So there's a lot of new information that is coming across, almost changing senses. And it's a lot. But I'm excited to see where dancing and dance accessibility is going to take me and where maybe I can help take accessible dance. And hopefully I'm here to learn. I'm not the expert. I am always going to be a learner. That is always my philosophy, that I will always be learning because the world is always changing. And so much of the world changed so much in the last 4 years because of the pandemic. And just now I'm starting to get back out into the public, attending in-person performances and just starting to explore more of how can I access dance and using touch and tactile descriptions and pro-tactile. They're slightly different things. So I think I'm kind of paused right here because there's so much more and I don't want to pre-answer other questions. So I'll give the microphone back to Celia.
Okie dokie. Thank you so much. I did want to say for the folks who are listening that we have turned off the chat because the chat function, it can be very annoying to people who are using screen readers. So please keep your questions in mind if you've got questions or comments. We will certainly look toward the end of this presentation and open up the room for everyone to ask their questions. So jot them down, but we don't have the chat enabled right now. So Kim, you touched on this a little bit in your talking about the difference between the Rockettes, and I know I've heard descriptions where they kick, they run, they go to the left, they go to the right, they go to the, so, and the difference between that and the Nutcracker. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you really would like to experience when you attend a dance performance? And is that different when you go to like a musical, let's say Annie or Hamilton, versus a traditional ballet or a modern dance or a dance that doesn't have any words or story attached to it?
Absolutely. I am a huge fan of Broadway musicals. So I love to go to the big shows with lots of music and dancing. Um, and I think that, that for me was sort of the major emphasis of what I did and the described performances that I worked on, and just, fine tuning that a little bit. I mean, I'll say, as somebody who listens, tap dance is accessible dance for the blind. I love it, because you get everything going on there. But the Broadway shows, there's obviously a lot of dance, and I didn't just want the describers to say they're dancing now. I wanted the describers to give me a sense of what they are doing. There's a lot of athleticism in dance moves in musicals, a lot of picking up dancers and lifting them over your head and then dropping them down, and the splits and the movement and the way they move around. So I think that the one thing that, yes, I do like is for some of the basic movements to be delivered in kind of a rhythm with the song that they're dancing to. I think that adds a dimension to it. But I like additional description as well of sort of the style, like they break away into couples, or they're groups of four across the stage, doing soft shoe or doing old time Charleston dance or ballroom dancing, some of those things, because, I can imagine what those are, and that paints the picture for me and makes that more descriptive and much more meaningful. The ballet was certainly an experience of a story that was dance. So it needed the description, but it also needed the movements and that rhythm, not so much rhythm, I guess, as just the smoothness and the flowing, because ballet is so much more flowing from movement to movement, with those intense moments where there's like spinning and leaping and those kind of things. You want to build up that intensity and understand that that's what's going on. I've had an opportunity in the last couple years to actually attend and participate in some dance recitals, because we have another accessible dance group in the Boston area, and they have made their performances virtual as well as in person. And I have come to experience some different things with that group. Dance Boston is what it's called, and it's run by people with disabilities, an inclusive dance troupe. And then my other most recent experience, which I really enjoyed, was viewing the documentary Telephone and hearing of the work done in that video that and the different styles of description that were used in that video. Some was very flowing, and the words blended into each other to kind of, for me, symbolize sort of that arching, flowing movement of the individual dancer and what they were conveying as well, uh, um, physically what they were doing and how they were moving in very smooth flowing gestures. And then other describers in that film had more um, almost syncopated description, more, I guess, not jerky in a bad way, but just different and not so flowing, a little more clipped in the delivery, which conveyed to me much more crisp movements of the dancer, not the flowing movements that the other description gave to me. And I really started to appreciate the nuance and understanding of how so much of dance could be conveyed using the right words and the right tones and inflection of the voice. So I'll hand it over to Carrie because her story is really interesting about this.
Uh, Thank you, Kim. This is Carrie speaking. I keep thinking of this one word, harmony. I think what we're really looking for in audio description, tactile description, and other kinds of accessibility, such as sign language interpreters or captioning, is finding a way for people who might need to use multiple channels to have them in a way that they harmonize with one another. What I would like to see or feel or hear with audio description is me coming from a dancer's perspective. I want to know a little bit more. And I would like to know more of the dancer's vocabulary. And so Kim was right that if you simply say something like they're doing old time Charleston, that certainly gives me a mental image of what kind of dance is happening. And you all have to remember that dance is a way that we communicate with one another. So dancing, whether it's a ballet or a musical, dancing is trying to convey a story. So if a describer is simply saying kick, 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 we're missing out the story. How are people interacting with one another? For description, I would want to know, are they dancing with each other? Is it in a romantic way? Is it in a way that is fun? Does it seem like between two friends, or does it seem between two lovers or complete strangers? So trying to add a little bit of the emotion into description would be something that I would like, it would be my hope that would come through in description. I also think about salsa, and I'm trying to think of how could I possibly audio describe salsa when it is happening so quickly that, and how can you do it also into a rhythm? And I think there is something to be said about making sure that there is a little prep that happens before a show. For me, that I would love a little bit more information before the show even begins to know. So today, this musical is going to have a little bit of different types of dancing. There'll be some swing dancing, there'll be some salsa dancing, there may be some ballroom dancing. And kind of knowing that ahead of time kind of prepares me to receive that information. So in the moment, I won't be so shocked that, oh, it's what kind of dancing is it? Other ways that would be helpful, and I would like to see something called a new kind of level of audio description. I would say something called ATD, audio tactile description, where I think this would be a good way of trying to harmonize different information together, also in a rhythm. So I know one of the questions later is going to be asking more about tactile description. Tactile description can only convey so much, but if I want to know what kind of dance is happening at that moment, and I can't hear what the audio describer said, if I was working with an interpreter or somebody who's using tactile description on my back, I would feel something like a bee drawn in the shape of a bee on my side, and I would know, okay, this is a ballet style. Um, I might feel a C drawn on my side, and I would know, okay, this is contemporary. And just knowing what kind of dance is happening automatically shifts me in the right mode of understanding what is happening on the stage. I want to know so much more than just movement. I want to understand, how does the movement connect to the story? And for a person who is deafblind, I am limited in understanding what people are saying, as I no longer can see closed captioning at the theater. I no longer can see sign language interpreters who are signing on the side of the stage. So if I'm getting audio description and tactile description, what I'm not getting is information about what people are saying. So trying to really connect to description to understand how is it also connected to the story will help give me that little extra information that I am lacking about what are people saying. So I guess there needs to be a little dialogue added into the description, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to pass this back over to Celia.
Okay, I really like what you had to say, Carrie, because asking for that information up front is really what describers use for pre-show notes, and those are the notes that we can give ahead of time that are not always available during the actual performance. But I think that reminder also to in a musical or in a piece that is presenting different types of dance, just give that information up front. This is going to be balletic, this is modern, this is Celtic folk dance, something like that. It seems to me what I'm hearing is would be really helpful for the two of you as you are uh, following along and trying to build the images in your mind. So to follow up with you, Carrie, um, people are more and more interested, describers in particular, are interested in learning um, how can we use the actual terminology, what the dancers are thinking, what the dancers are exploring in the creation of the dance. How can we put that into our description? And my understanding is that that's kind of how you teach salsa, or how you learn salsa, is that people would say out loud what it was they were doing, and you were able to mimic those movements. Am I correct in that assumption, Carrie?
This is Kelly speaking. Yeah, pretty close actually. So yes, when I learned, people are describing very specifically how they are moving. And it's not so much that they're explaining that I'm stepping forward, I'm stepping back. They're trying to explain how the body is really moving that you can't see or feel, and explain things such as, imagine a string at the top of your head and I'm touching the top of my head and pulling it up a little bit. That means that I am trying to make sure that my body is up straight. You may not realize that the body is kind of slumping down a little bit until you pull this imaginary string up and you correct the body position. Then the other thing is like saying, okay, step forward, step back. There's a little bit more. So I try to use some other representation. Sometimes I will use tape and put tape on the dance floor. It can be a blue paint tape with some friction on it, so deaf people can have a visual representation. Blind people can feel something with their foot of where the line is, and understand how one foot moves forward, one foot stays at the line and steps in place. Bring the foot back together. Now step with the right foot backwards. Your left foot stays at the line and bring them back together. So there is a bit of trying to do a lot of description, also in a sort of a rhythmic way. It can be hard to say, okay, we're gonna do this move, this move, this move, this move. Eventually, at first, in the beginning, when I was doing dance, I didn't actually know the terminology for many of these dances because I couldn't hear it. There is a kind of dance that is salsa in a circle, which is very similar to square dancing, how square dancing will have dancers as couple line up around the room in a square motion. In salsa, this is the name of the type of dance. It's called Reda de Casino, which is salsa in a circle. And couples are dancing together, and they are all together in a circle, making one big circle. Now, all of these different moves had a name, and some of these words are in Spanish, so it's not going to come out clearly in the caption. Like, for example, Montana. And the other reason why I liked Reda de Casino so much was because when I could see, there was a hand sign for each of these different dances. So Montana for mountain was to be a hand waving up and down in the generation of mountains. And the reason why they have these hand signals was because sometimes it would be so loud, people couldn't hear the caller. Another kind of sign would be siete, which is like a 7 upside down. And I'm doing that with my hand. And then loco was sort of rolling your finger over on the side of your head as in sort of crazy. And so siete loco. So I had to learn by sign language first. I was learning all of these dance terminology with a hand signal before I knew what the dance terminology was. So then later, as I started to hear a little with the cochlear implant, I was starting to hear all these words and did not quite connect what they were. So to me, it was another level of learning of once again trying to pair the words to what I've been seeing all this time. But the good thing about some of the salsa moves is that some of them are pretty explanatory, like side step. That's a move. And side step, you step to the side, to your right, you bring them together, step to the left, bring them together, step to the right, bring them together. Imagine a square and you are standing inside that square, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And then if I'm going to add some more styling, I'll say something like, okay, so a side step with a drop, a side step with a drop. And so without seeing the dance, you can really kind of visualize what that is already, what's happening right there. The other component that I try to do with description is breaking the body into different sections. You have the top section, you have the bottom section. A lot in salsa is the whole body is involved in salsa. The hips is moving in a figure 8 motion. It's very subtle, but that's how the hips are moving. The feet are not always moving really fast when a lot of the movement is coming from the hips and the arms. You want to explain what people are doing with their arms, what they are doing with their hips, what they are doing with their feet, and there are a lot of turn patterns. So in salsa, you don't necessarily have to say they just did a right turn, they did a left turn, they did a right hand low, or they did a inside turn, outside turn. Now, some of those you probably could say because those terms themselves are pretty easy to understand what's happening inside, outside, left, right, turn. There are other ones that's more confusing, like cross-body lead. Now, I think that is a term you could use for people who are not dancers. They will understand that the two bodies are changing direction. They have crossed around each other. So I think it's helpful to borrow a little from the dance vocabulary. So cross-body lead, you don't need to say they did a cross-body lead, but you could say something like they crossed each other, so they're now facing opposite direction. So I think I'll stop right there, and hopefully that answers your question a little, Celia.
Well, I was up dancing, so I don't know. I imagine. No, that's really terrific. To hear that, and and I do have a follow-up question to that, but I was going to ask Kim if Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I did. I wanted to talk a little bit about training and instruction because I think that terminology is so important and having an understanding of that. WGBH in the Boston area was kind of the starting force for audio description for media, and they did the first dance workshop that I had the opportunity to participate in, and it was all about building vocabulary as an understanding of dance. So we actually, met and we talked about a lot of ballet because that was kind of where we started, and we had a a doll that was on the table that was one of those flexible knees bend, arms bend, hips move, arms, everything, and we would move the doll in different dance positions. Um, we actually had a dancer come in, a male dance instructor, and for some of the moves, he would actually put himself in the position of doing the moves, and people who didn't understand, he was totally cool, and you need the absolute right person to do this, but he was totally cool with people touching his arms and his legs to feel how he was positioned. And we also brought in equipment from dance so that um, people would understand, well, what does it mean when they talk about being on point in their shoes? Well, maybe you need to see the ballet slipper shoe to understand that the toes are reinforced and they go up on their toes. And yeah, no, you and I who don't dance can't do that, but years and years of training allows them to do this. And this is what it looks like. So we did that, and it was really, really helpful to have the physical connection between the term and the position so that you could really build that vocabulary. And I was just thinking about vocabulary. So this time of year, people watch It's a Wonderful Life, and there's that amazing dance scene in the high school gymnasium where Jimmy Stewart is dancing the Charleston, and just so engrossed with his partner that he doesn't see that the floor is moving and opening up to the swimming pool, and that he's dancing away. And they're very descriptive in that scene about the Charleston and how they're dancing and moving their arms and their knees and all that. So it I think I just went to Chicago live here in Boston with description a couple weeks ago, and the tango was very prominent in that movie. So, having the description of kind of the sensualness of a tango dance and the movement of the people and the bending and how they bend back and their legs are bent in a certain position, and even generally the female dancer, lifts the leg up around the waist of the male dancer. And it's like, wow, picturing that was like, that's pretty athletic. It sounds amazing. So, and we talked about shimmy, shimmy your hips and shimmy your shoulders. And so my husband and I went home after that and we were practicing shimmying because I think it had been a while since I shimmied. So we did it in the privacy of home to talk about how we could do it. And we had some friends over who were critiquing, yeah, no, that's not such a great shimmy. Do a little more of this and a little more wiggle. And so I think we got it down, but it was, one of those things you probably don't want to do, out in public unless you're quite sure of what you're doing. But it was a lot of fun. And I also want to say it was good to hear that Carrie was involved with the Boston Ballet because they did an amazing pre-show for the Nutcracker. And we had a pre-show touch tour, again, where we had the ballet slippers and we had the tutu. In the Boston Ballet, that I thought a tutu was a fluffy little poofy thing you wear around your hips, because I think I took ballet when I was like 4 years old, so I had a little tutu suitcase. But the tutu that they used in the Boston Ballet for the Sugar Plum Fairy was more like a disc. It was flat and it went around her hips, but it was kind of like a record in that flatness, but it was big and shiny and sparkly and around her waist. And I would have never known that. I would have thought it was the puffy, fluffy tutu that I wore when I was 4 years old in the ballet class. So I think, touch tours and workshops are great ways to expand an understanding to the community of how dance really can be enjoyable and not something to be avoided.
Mhm.
Thanks, Kim. You
Mhm.
made that. I have that image. And yes, the tutus and the Nutcracker are very, you're afraid that if they fall on the stage, they're gonna
They're gonna
slice
roll
themselves
away.
in half.
Yeah, they're like a LP record around their waist. So
So I do have a follow-up to this question, because I know as a describer, when I describe musicals, I'm always faced with when they're doing dance scenes in particular, I'm always faced with how do I get it all in? And Carrie touched on this a little bit in terms of that you can't say it all, and really how do you make your priorities? What do you choose to say? And 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 how often do you want to say it? And so I'm curious to know, in when you go to a musical, let's just say Oklahoma, all right, and they're
mhm.
doing one of the big dance scenes. What do you want to know from that? Do you want to know I mean, Kim, you've talked a little bit about, oh, that's really athletic, so kind of know that how athletic these dancers are. But do you want to know all of the movements? Do you want to know the feeling, the relationships between people? And I know it changes from musical to musical, but I'd be curious to know, as a person who is, at the event and listening, really relying on the describer to carry you along. What kind of things do you want to know?
Great
And
question. Great
we'll start
question.
with you,
So
Kim. Yep.
I and I'll start because I have more experience with audio description than Carrie as she's coming in new to this. But her perspective will be really great as well. Um, and I think remembering the fundamental of audio description, which is you're describing the key visual elements, you have to figure out what that needs to be first. But I do hope to hear something about the style of the dance. But especially in a musical, which is where you're going to get dance, people come to the musicals to hear the music. So it's that balance of you have to let them hear the words of the best song in the whole show and not talk over that. But it's also maintaining the balance of giving us as much information as you can squeeze in. So I usually coach describers that, let the verses go with no description if you can, set the stage for what kind of dancing there might be. Um, and then feel a little more free to talk over the chorus, because once you've heard the chorus, you're going to hear it again or again, and depending on what the song is, and that gives you a little more space to give some description, because I think people who are listening to the music are a little more patient about having you talk over the chorus because they know the chorus, they know what it is, they know it's going to happen a couple more times, but you're not talking over the songs that they paid a lot of money to come hear for their favorite musicals. So I think that's really good guidance to sort of figure out how much time do I have to fit in descriptions of what's happening. Because, if you don't say anything through the entire song, I absolutely will wonder. I wonder what they were doing on stage all that time they were singing. So it's again finding the right balance between describing how they're moving around, how the scene is changing, what they're doing while we listen to the music as well.
Thank you, Kim. That's really, really helpful. Carrie, would you like to add anything?
Yes, this is Carrie speaking. I was nodding my head. Yes, I would love to add something. The first and only real experience I had with audio description was last year. attending the 1776 musical at the American Repertory Theater. And I did connect with the accessibility manager there, and I said, this is my first time coming to a play since the pandemic began. I honestly don't know how exactly I can make this accessible. I have to do a lot of experimenting to figure out what could possibly work for me. I don't know if sitting in the middle, on the side, sitting by the interpreter, up close, or further back, or how would audio description help me? So I knew that I probably wouldn't, I did not really want to try to explore using the assistive devices that come with audio description. What I did was I met with the audio describer before the musical, and she set the stage for me. She really described the stage for me. She gave me a little teaser of some of the things that I could expect as the scene was unfolding. She would describe the performers a little bit, because I wouldn't have realized that all the performers were women. Like, what? All of these, it's like Hamilton, but instead of all Black people or people of color, it's now all people who are all women. It's all women. And the majority is a very diverse cast. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have figured that out. And it would have been important to me to know at the beginning. Maybe it takes away a little bit of that wow factor when it actually happened. But I think for me, I wouldn't have known that. So Kim mentioned seeing the Chicago musical, and to me, like she said, there was a tango. But I remember a time when I could see, and I saw the musical, and I saw the movie. So that tango comes from like a scene, like he had it coming. And so it's not just, okay, these performers are doing the tango, but to say that they are fiercely dancing the tango, does really help also convey the emotion that is happening in that scene. Okay, back to you, Celia.
That's great. We are coming up on the hour, which is amazing. And so I wanted to say that we had two other questions, but we did talk a little bit about touch and how sensory tours, and you talked a little bit about protactile, how that really does enhance the experience. And we'll have to come back to talk about Carrie's mission in life is to get audio description that's going to how do we reach people who are deafblind through their technology? But she's got Kim working on that now. Kim's working on that one.
Well, exactly. And I think we should come back because I'm starting, and I want to kind of throw this out in case people who are listening have some solutions, but Carrie and a couple other deafblind people who can hear, have some hearing, are asking, how can I get the assisted listening and the audio description in the same headset or at the same time without having to wear two headsets, which is pretty darn hard, I think. So I'm starting to explore some of the technologies, and I think Carrie has some thoughts about that. So maybe we can come back and talk more about how can the technology help us to augment the experience for people who have severe hearing and vision loss, to have more access to the live performances, and even, and even television with description and streaming services, which is a little easier because you're seeing those on your own computer, and hopefully your systems are set up the way that works best for you, so you can experience that with your own technology. But the live experience is really a little more complicated, and I am trying to tackle that locally here in the Boston area. So anybody who has any thoughts about that, I'd love to communicate more and have some dialogue about that.
So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and ask anyone who has a question. We do have just a couple of minutes left, but go ahead and unmute yourself, turn on your camera. And if you have a question for either Kim or Carrie. I'm not seeing anyone. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to talk with both of you. I've learned something. I hope other people have learned something also. And I want to know, Carrie, when is your next salsa dance class so that I can come and participate?
From Texas?
Well, I have relatives in Boston, so I get up there once in a while.
Oh gosh, no more for 2023, but there's some more coming up in 2024. So I believe I will be teaching a dance inclusion class at the Harvard Dance Center
Oh.
in January, late January. So that's one thing coming up.
Great, great. So thank you both again. Our next conversation will be in February. Working on who those presenters are going to be at this time. But if you'd like to get to Kim and offer your advice as to how we might be able to make audio description a little bit more accessible to people who are deaf blind, I know that she would appreciate your input as she's taken on this challenge in the Boston area. And so you can reach Kim, either you can reach out to me, Celia at artsparktx.org, or perhaps Kim, can they reach you at the Perkins School for the Blind?
Yes, I'm happy to give my email address. It's kim.charlson, CHARLSON, @perkins.org.
All right. Well, thank you both. I hope you have a wonderful holiday planned, that you spend time with friends and family. And we'll see everyone in the new year.
Thank
Happy
you,
holidays.
Celia.
All righty. Happy
Happy
holidays.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Kim. Bye-bye.